Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, hello. Hello, welcome to our podcast. Hello. Hello.
It's Everybody Hates Rand, your friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
I'm Sally
I don't
Goodger.
think we even got through our full introduction last week. We were so irate about everything that had happened.
It was pretty rough. The slope, it continues to go downward, but the incline, grade of the incline has lessened just a little bit this week.
Yeah, I was reading these chapters thinking, have I been totally, brainwashed or worn down somehow that I think this is pretty acceptable?
Yeah, I was like, this is pretty mild.
I just was like, okay, yeah, that's fine.
It makes me really mad and it's really disgusting, but I was like, eh.
Yeah. My one main beef is that Rand does a war crime in this little section, but I found the Nynaeve sort of miniature mystery segment to be inoffensive and overall nice. This may be a controversial statement, but I don't think Brandon has done any major wrongs to Nynaeve's character. I actually think he may have improved her in some ways.
Yeah.
I found her to be a much more empathetic narrator.
Yeah, me too.
Which is fitting because Nynaeve is a very, helping others oriented person. She's a healer.
Yeah.
So it was a little ridiculous that in most books she's just a super judgmental asshole, including to the people she's healing.
Yeah.
And in this one, she is still kind of rude to people's faces, but she's much more empathetic behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch her, the duality, she accepts and, tells us repeatedly she's, playing the role of the Aes Sedai, you know? She's like, I'm definitely leaning into it, and I'm like, we love a self-aware Poirot.
Yeah, for sure. So that's inoffensive. We find out where Grendel is, or at least we do, because this 13-year-old victim of...
This 13-year-old victim of fucking brainwashing.
Yeah, has revealed it to us. But, the Rand bit is bad, and then we get a Matt segment that is, again, just, a not Matt character, but other than that, fine.
It's like, who is this bitch?
Who is this?
I do not know her at all.
I don't know her either.
I don't know her.
This is a man who would be the dungeon master of a D&D campaign, and I firmly believe that Matt would show up to session 1 and then never again.
Yeah, suddenly Bramley Mulligan is here whipping out 6-page backstories for a completely irrelevant side character. Are you joking?
Sorry, just imagining Matt as Bramley Mulligan. Got me really good at improv. Good at silly voices.
Good at monologues.
An ally.
Would never marry a fascist.
Married to Isabella Roland.
The love of my life.
The funniest woman alive. You guys, we got on the Dropout streaming service, so I highly recommend that, but now we're really into the whole college humor lore of it all.
Yeah. Emily
so
watches all their D&D stuff, which seems really fun, and I get the benefit of knowing about it without watching actual play, which is hard for me, but I do want to, know the story.
Yeah, if you're Critical Role is 4 hours a week of content, that seems really overwhelming. Give Dimension 20 a shot, because it's also a lot funner with, like, non-high fantasy settings.
Yeah.
All of the people who are on it are extremely funny. They do guest DMs. The main cast is not all white.
Yeah, and they're currently doing a campaign where all the players are famous drag queens, which
Yeah.
is, like, really exciting. One just as, like, a concept.
Yeah.
Dungeons and
One,
Drag Queens.
so good.
And, like, two,
Two, Brennan Lee Mulligan finally got a new shirt.
You think Izzy's just in his closet, like, this
I think
is all
Izzy
the
does
same
not
plaid
care.
shirt?
I think Izzy's like, whatever, wear your same 6 shirts.
So one, just, like, a super fun and exciting concept. All the drag queens are drag queens who kind of rose to fame through the RuPaul's Drag Race sort of sector. So they're all just, like, very funny, charismatic, well-known. So one, great concept. Two, just, like, very strong political statement given the current state of affairs in our country regarding queer rights and the attacks on drag queens in particular. So way to go, Dropout TV. It's an extremely cheap streaming service that provides a lot of really good content and, I don't know, like, gives a shit about people. So
Yeah. And Dungeons and Drag Queens, all of the drag queens have never played D&D before, or if they have, it was like, you know, a session in middle school.
sure.
So I'm hearing I haven't watched it yet, but I'm hearing it's also like a master class in how to DM for new players.
That's great. Yeah,
and
Brennan.
get them engaged on their level.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brennan is a delight. I don't watch it. I don't watch Dimension 20, but every clip I, like, see on TikTok, I'm like, this is truly the funniest DM and the best DM in the universe.
He is one of the funniest people alive, especially when it comes to DMs.
Okay,
Yeah, that's like the good content that we're engaging with
Yeah.
these days. But here we are still back in,
Here we are still reading this, the longest book in the fucking universe.
I don't know, at least we're over the hill.
Yeah. That's true because my death is incoming, surely. It's so long, not only just, like, in terms of actual page count, but the amount of suffering I go through every time I have to read this book makes life feel 100 times longer.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, we open with Nynaeve, who is watching a cool thing, which is a ghost funeral.
A ghost parade or
Ghost
something.
parade with Cad Swan and Maurice and Corel.
Yeah, just some of the Aes Sedai. Apparently this is a phenomenon that's been happening in Eridomon for a little while.
Yeah.
It's just this nightly ghost funeral.
Yeah.
So everyone has kind of just, like, gone up to a vantage point to observe it.
Yeah, they're just, like, it's a bunch of, like, glowing ghosts carrying a coffin around the city.
Yeah. And it's like Corel and Maurice are just sort of, like, complaining about what a dick Rand is. Which is valid.
Yeah.
And Nynaeve is just kind of like, yeah, agreed, but there's really no use complaining about it at this point. Like, you guys aren't being productive at all.
Yeah.
And kind of has this weird moment of eye contact with Cad Swan where it seems like they're on the same page about this.
Yeah.
But also Nynaeve is like, I fucking hate Cad Swan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're
Which
so
is-
valid,
Yeah,
Nynaeve.
she's really correct for that.
Yeah, because Cad Swan
Cad
sucks.
Swan sucks. Oh, God. She's the worst.
As is usual in these Brandon Sanderson segments, there's very little mystery involved in terms of, like, Nynaeve, what she's thinking about and what her primary concerns are. Mm-hmm. Right now, she's mulling over the problem of how to, like, be a good advisor to Rand when he is so hell-bent on not trusting anyone and being a mega dick. She's kind of like, well, the only person who's ever been at least moderately successful was Moiraine, and as far as I know, that was only because Moiraine at the end of her life was, like, licking his boots,
Yeah.
which was a major bummer. And Nynaeve was like, I'm not gonna do that, so I don't really know, but maybe I can do something that will help him and
Yeah.
get me in his good graces. As she's, like, leaving, there's just, like, people on the streets. As we said last week, Eridomon full of poor sluts. So, Nynaeve passes some and, like, hears a child coughing very Dickensian.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, bother. Goes over to assist the child, is all, like, annoyed at the child's parents. She's like, you have Aes Sedai in the city who you could be sending to for healing. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot of reasons that they might not have gone to the Aes Sedai for healing. 1, you're all assholes.
Yeah.
B, apparently some of you just can't heal.
Yeah.
Like, that has been a plot point several times.
Yeah, also, like, if you are a refugee living in poverty, wouldn't it be frightening to go ask somebody who might ask you to pay them?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was my first thing. I was like, they probably didn't ask because they assumed that they would demand payment of some sort, so why would they put the child through that hike up the hill or whatever?
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why people in vulnerable positions do not seek out healthcare, and it's mostly because the healthcare is not good, or
yeah, or like
the system is going to be bad for them in some way. Like in a modern day, a refugee family might also be worried about being separated from their child.
Yeah, or if they are undocumented, suddenly the police and ICE get involved. Like, it's sort of a, not to like linger on this because I don't think Brandon was intending to be like, look at Nynaeve, what a good healer, but it's just like got this sort of attitude of like, why don't the poor people help themselves? It's very Avienda at the beginning of the book being like, refugees are stupid.
Yeah, like Nynaeve at the end was like, next time fucking tell people that they should just bring their sick to where we're at. You know, be less ass. Be better.
Be less ass.
Be less ass. Be less ass. I'm gonna chant that at my local sports team.
Yeah. True, Utah sports teams are pretty bad.
But like in the background of Nynaeve's mind, she is like pretty sympathetic to these people, so it's like a weird sort of contrast that we're going on there. Like, Nynaeve looks at this mother and is like, God, it's clear she hasn't been sleeping lately. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand why this father is being protective and antsy over his child. You know, like, it's just a weird
and instead of saying any of those things out loud, she's just sort of rude.
I guess I feel like in a Robert Jordan Nynaeve chapter, Nynaeve would not be having any of the more charitable thoughts. She would just be thinking and acting out the rude stuff. So
you're right.
It's at least nice to know that she is not an asshole on the inside.
That's true. To know that her internal world is compassionate.
It's compassionate and kind to people. Yeah. Rough. Anyway, she goes back to, like, the manor house, and she doesn't tell us her plan, really, so we're left to sort of, like, follow her along in this little mystery. But she gathers up some off-duty soldiers, and then asks the, like, what's that called? The, like, main housekeeper of this place where Rand is staying, like, can you take me to where these dungeons are that the messenger who was sent from the king would have died in. I want to go investigate them for myself. So they go to this. Nynaeve enters it with a couple of soldiers. They find the jailer and his two, like, associates. This is also, like, the shop is in a chandler's shop, a candle making business.
Yeah.
And Nynaeve notes that this is of course a front. And one of the Saldean soldiers remarks that likely the main jailer and his two adult guys don't do any of the work. Instead, there's this kind of like 13-year-old or whatever teen boy apprentice who's probably doing all of the work. They're taken down to the dungeons. Nynaeve sees the very inhumane conditions under which people are being imprisoned. In this case, it is just the, like, Domani woman whose house Rand is staying in, who sentenced her to this because the other guy died. Nynaeve interrogates the jailer and is like, basically like, did you kill him? They're like, no, that would be stupid. He was a very valuable prisoner. Mm-hmm. And also we have to be good at keeping people alive because that's our job.
Yikes.
And they're like, great. Nynaeve kind of happens to notice that the woman who's currently in prison, sorry, I can't remember her name and I don't care.
Either.
Is sick and realizes that she is being or has been poisoned.
Yeah.
She manages to save her life, and they put together that the person who prepares the food is actually this apprentice who's not necessarily involved with the underground dungeon business so much. But he tries to run and they catch him. Mm-hmm. In the next chapter, Nynaeve wakes up Rand and is like, here's this child that
killed the messenger
and is also seeking to kill, this woman, this Eridamani politician. And Rand is like, oh, well, he must be one of Grendal's people, and likely he's under a whole lot of compulsion. So take the compulsion off, and maybe he'll be able to tell us, like, something about Grendel. He tells Nynaeve how to take the compulsion off, which is just, like, apparently he can't do it because he's not as skilled or something. And it's just, like, an arduous process or whatever, so Nynaeve has to do it. And when she is done, the boy, like, basically keels over dead. Nynaeve compares him to being in, like, a vegetative state compared to, like, a patient that she had dealt with in the past who'd, like, suffered a traumatic head injury.
Yeah.
And had, a traumatic brain injury and was no longer...
Yeah, like, fully cognitive.
Yeah, had lost her cognitive abilities. And so this boy is... And Rand's just like, oh, no worries. And Nynaeve's like... Rand's like, this is just what happens when you take the compulsion off, because, like, the compulsion is so entrenched in his brain that it's already done a tremendous amount of damage, so taking it off just leaves the damage. And Nynaeve's like, so you just didn't tell me that, like,
yeah,
that this would kill this boy. And Rand's like, yeah, like, not really I don't care.
Yeah, like, but right before the boy dies, Rand's, like, yelling at him, first of all, so
Rand's
calm
like,
down.
Tell me where Grendel is. And this boy, like, manages to say a name of a place. Before dying, tragically.
Yeah, so it's, like we were saying, it's somehow, like, less fucked up than other things that have happened, but it's also just still, like, incredibly disturbing. Both... We're getting further into the realm of compulsion, which we've sort of danced around a little bit, but as Grendel we're building towards her being our big bad in this situation, that's, like, her whole thing, so we're getting more into that realm, and it's really freaky, both just as a concept, but also now we're learning just how much damage it does to a person's brain, which is extremely upsetting, so, like, it's just a very disturbing scene. And Rand manipulating Nynaeve in this way is obviously really upsetting. She's supposed, like he says later in the chapter, she's one of the people he trusts the most, and he's still treating her so badly. So obviously, like, not great in terms of Rand's mental state, but it also is, like, there's so much happening that everyone wants to pin on Rand's mental state. They're like, Rand is not himself, and they're not really... I feel like our main Aes Sedai figures are not really giving a lot of weight to the fact that, like, Rand is still making conscious decisions. Like, nobody really wants to hold him accountable to the decisions that he's making. They only want to talk about the fact that he's obviously sort of gone off a deep end of some sort, and they need to, like, course correct that, rather than being like, hey, pal, you can't just, like, murder children for information.
Yeah, it's really, like, infantilizing in a way.
Yeah, it's a good point.
The way that they're just like, this mentally ill person is just so mentally ill at this point, in our opinion, that his decisions, as bad and as harmful as they are, we can't even really, like, lay at his feet. The only thing they're concerned about is his decision to, like, make himself harder. And they're like, that's what's leading to all of this. And Nynaeve is just like, Rand, that... if that is your mentality, then this will end with you dead. And Rand is like, yeah, bestie.
It's like, yeah, I know.
I would like to end up dead because clearly there's no other... He's like, there's no other way. And it's just stupid for me to have any sort of hope for the future. And blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, okay, bestie, like, that's the depression talking. That's the trauma talking. There is obviously value in having... hope for the future.
Yeah.
Even in a position as awful as yours. Blah, 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 blah. But of course, Rand does not want to hear that. And so, yeah, instead of it being like this sort of, okay, this man has made a conscious decision to behave in a certain way, perhaps to, like, alleviate some of the pressure he is under, or perhaps in an effort to, make his life easier to deal with. Trauma isn't as hard to deal with if you are, in Rand's opinion, making yourself immune to it.
Yeah, it's like a deeply dissociative state that he's operating in, just like completely disconnected from his own life.
Yeah, but you are still responsible for the things that you do as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I didn't say that to try and be like, no, I just want to like clarify what I'm saying is like the dissociation that people have from their lives, or this sort of like stepping back from the everyday events happening around them, is 100% a coping mechanism. And like, yes, you are still responsible for Tybalt. You are still responsible for what happens.
You are still responsible for Tybalt.
You are still responsible for Tybalt and the crimes that he is currently committing. Look at him trying to squeeze. Looks like Pooh Bear stuck in a hole.
Tybalt's clawing open the closet in this room in an effort. Let's not have sliding closet doors.
Yeah, that should be on the top of the priority list.
Ooh, there he goes.
Anyway, yes, Rand is still responsible for the decisions that he's making, and, like, it's really alarming to me. Like, I understand from a narrative perspective, like we've talked about in the past, this series has never really taken into account the experience of the common folk, or really, like, what it is like as the common folk for the Dragon Reborn to be their leader. It's only ever about what it's like for the Dragon Reborn to be in power. Like, we don't ever get, like, an on-the-ground point of view from Eridomon, for instance.
Poor sluts.
Yeah, well, from one of the poor sluts.
The Dickensian children roaming around.
Yeah, fucking Artful Dodger out here with bronchitis or whatever. We never get that, and the narrative is not concerned with that, so, like, it's not, like, out of line with the narrative to, like, not focus on the fact that Rand is becoming a miserable tyrant. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody... Like, the people whose point of view we get, they're not really impacted, except for Catspawn, but, like, that was deserved.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me from, like, this narrative's perspective why nobody is focusing on the fact that Rand has become this horrible tyrant. But it's, like, frustrating to read about that nobody is, like, concerned that this person who is, like, literally in charge of, at this point, probably over half the continent simply cannot be bothered to have a single ounce of empathy. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody...
Or have any sort of discussion about ethics.
Yeah, or be willing to be held accountable for his actions.
Yeah, like, this is tyrannical behavior, and everyone is just like, it's because poor Uwu Rand is having such a rough time and is just becoming this awful person because... It's easier for him to become an awful person. Yeah, it's always easier to be an awful person.
Yep.
That's
kind of the point.
That's the point. It's hard to be good.
Yeah.
Okay? We all get that. But it's just Nynaeve's out here judging people for not bringing their sickly children to receive questionable medical care.
Yeah.
But is like, I will make every excuse possible for Rand. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just difficult because as much as Rand is mentally ill, he is not experiencing any sort of psychotic break from reality.
Yeah.
He is still very much in charge of his own thoughts and actions, and therefore is both legally and ethically very much accountable for what he's doing.
Yeah, totally. And, like, even... in an experience, I would say I have, like, very minimal experience in this because one of the housing programs that I work with serves a population with serious mental illness. Like, those consequences are not always ideal, but, like, even folks who are having extreme breaks from reality, like, there has to be, like, consequence is an intense word because they're not responsible for what's going on, but there typically is some sort of intervention. Yes. That happens so those folks stop hurting themselves and hurting others, so they stop presenting as a danger. Right. You know, again, often that is, like, way too militant, but that's, like, a whole other conversation. So, like, this sort of, like, dancing around doing any type of intervention, any type of talk with Rand because he's just, feeling really down and out these days is just, like, absurd.
Yeah, what we're meant to understand from all of this is that lots of people are trying to intervene by starting to have these conversations with Rand, but an intervention cannot be successful unless there are any sort of consequences.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the pattern that we're seeing is that Katsuan, Nynaeve, Min, whoever comes up to Rand, says, what you're doing is a problem. Rand says, no, it's not. And they say, agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And continue on their day. It's not like Min says, if you don't stop doing this, I will leave. Mm-hmm. It's not like Nynaeve is like, if you don't stop doing this, I will leave.
Yeah. It's also very interesting that it falls on all of the women in Rand's life to try and intervene.
Well, because the men just get it. All of the Ashman are like, I understand because I labor under the same immense manly burden. And Lan is like, I get it.
I just have a hard time believing that Davram Bashir would stand for this. You know?
Yeah, in my version of Davram Bashir.
He's taking his army and getting the fuck out of there.
Honestly, Davram Bashir is king of staying in his lane in a way.
True.
He's just like
he stayed too far in his lane in this instance. He's
like, okay. Yeah, to be fair, Ruark and Davram Bashir have also like brought up their qualms. Mm-hmm. But there's an interesting sort of like Bashir and Ruark are both in a military hierarchy under Rand.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And so there are, like, more palpable consequences for them if they misstep.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Aes Sedai, who are there basically as a formality.
Yeah.
And especially people like Min and Nynaeve, who are just like...
We're kind of here because we love you.
Yeah, we're here because of our personal connections for you. It's again, this series would have been so much more interesting to me anyway, if some of our main characters had been able to, like, stick around and interact more.
Yeah.
Because of what happens with Rand at the end of this book, spoiler alert, he basically becomes enlightened, and it's like, tee-hee, now he's good again, and everything's fixed and solved. We never have to see Perrin and Mat dealing with this extreme side of Rand. They sort of got tastes of it at its, like, beginning, over in books 5 and 6. But we don't have to see them, how they would interact with this.
Yeah.
Probably based on Robert Jordan, not well.
Yeah.
But, like, in a world where there are consequences and interventions, it would have been interesting to see, like, Perrin and Mat be like, we will take our immense followings that you rely on for military power.
Yeah.
And also leave.
And leave, you know, like...
We'll try and fix this on our own, and you can show up in the last battle or not.
Yeah. That would have been extremely interesting. And it's just, like... And I gotta say, you guys, this sort of, like, ooh-woo attitude, not holding Rand accountable to his actions, is pretty common amongst the fans as well.
Yeah.
So I think in part that's just because, like, that's how the narrative presents him. Rand is only a figure of tragic suffering. He never seems to be a figure of decision-making, which is silly to me because all he does all day long is make decisions.
Bad ones, mostly.
Bad ones. So it's just, like, the narrative puts him in this really confusing space where he's just everyone's most special boy, wants to hold Rand accountable for his actions, and, like, it's not like Rand ever gets his version of the Nuremberg trials, you know?
Yeah, because what happens at the end of this book, Rand gets to effectively wipe the slate clean. Everyone is so relieved when Rand 2.0 comes out of this and is like, I'm enlightened, I'm perfect, I'm wise, I'm lovely, I'm absolutely Jesus. Everyone is just like, oh my god, it's such a relief that he's not being an asshole anymore.
Yeah.
That they're not like, so are we going to talk about the bad stuff you did?
Yeah, like, as we've talked about, these books follow, over the course of the 14 books, the cycle of the hero's journey. We see hero's journeys, and then we're seeing sort of macro hero's journey with Rand. An important part of the hero's journey is what's called apotheosis, or this sort of, like, apotheosis means, like, a god-making in Greek. So this sort of elevation of the hero who often starts as an everyday man into being somebody who is above the people, you know, who it often comes in the form of some type of enlightenment. There'll be crucifixions imagery, you know, all this sort of stuff.
Sorry, just remember Jenny Nicholson's Easter play. YouTube video.
So there'll be this sort of, like, again, this sort of God making, this idea that this is suddenly someone very different than the everyday
It's Luke
society.
Skywalker coming back in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Fully as a Jedi.
Yeah, fully they're sort of also, that's another part of it, is like fully realized as the hero that they need to be. And that's what we're playing with at the end of this book, when Rand's like, I've gone through my abyss, this sort of like extremely dark mental state, and I'm coming out of it fully realized as the Dragon Reborn I need to be in order to win the last battle. And it's just like so hard for me, because it's like part of what makes figures like Jesus and the Buddha, which we're often playing with in these sort of like apotheosis imagery, compelling, is that they did not commit atrocities before their enlightenment or crucifixion.
Yeah.
So
It's not like Jesus shot a bunch of orphans and then was like, Daddy!
and be like, oh, I'm better now.
I'm better.
And like,
Yeah. Like, it leads you to some really interesting thought problems. Like, in a world where new gods are created, should the gods not be held accountable for their mortal actions?
yeah.
Like, someone write that book, you know?
Ooh,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
That is interesting. But
like, yeah, here it's just like, oh, Rand's perfect now, so it's no big deal.
yeah, and like, to draw on Star Wars as an example, because Star Wars relies so heavily on the hero's journey, it's like,
George Lucas was on Joseph Campbell's dick.
yeah, he was like, oh, I've got notes upon notes. But it's like, you compare the arcs of the two main characters in each trilogy. Luke Skywalker. Lovely, weird little guy.
Just a
no
twink.
atrocities. Just a twink who committed 0 atrocities.
Yep. Has done nothing wrong in his perfect life.
And then, of course, you're playing with Anakin Skywalker, his father. Oh my god, spoiler if you do that. His father, who, like, a huge part of that arc...
Sorry, wait. I just can't get over someone who in 2023 hasn't
like,
heard the news.
What?
Who starts off with The Phantom Menace, of course.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you?
Why would
it's
you
the
start
first
at,
movie,
why
right?
wouldn't you start at number 1? But the for all the like flaws that the first 3 movies, episodes 1 through 3 of Star Wars have, like the arc that Anakin takes from literally being space Jesus, literally being immaculately conceived by the Force or whatever is going on there, going through this arc where he is like obviously supposed to be destined to be this great hero. Anakin, of course, commits all these, like, crazy atrocities, and then...
Including killing orphans!
Including shooting orphans, and then wanting to be like, I was correct. And then there's everyone who's like, no, like, you no longer get to occupy this role as hero, because you have behaved so far out of what is expected.
They're just like, well, you failed. You're the bad guy now.
Yeah. And Anakin's like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah. And, like, Anakin does go through a sort of, like, dark hero's journey in that he sort of apotheosizes as Darth Vader.
Yeah, sure, totally. Sort of like a dark hero's journey.
We even have, I think, that sort of crucifixion imagery of him getting raised up in his new cyborg body. And, yeah, it's just, like, you either go one or the other way. You're either a hero or you either live one, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, you know, a dark night is a very dark time for all of us, or whatever. But I think Anakin is a very interesting, like, case study for a lot of reasons this way. He does have this sort of, like, anti-hero's journey, which is where Rand almost seems to be heading, where, like, you become, you know, Lucifer, or rather, you become fallen, rather than being raised up the way that Jesus was. But, you know, Anakin and Darth Vader get held to, like, very interesting consequences narratively.
Yeah, like, Darth Vader has a redemption arc at the end. And, like, that's the point I think we're trying to make, is that you don't have to become a villain just because you had this sort of, like, dark arc.
Sure.
Your abyss was particularly dark. But that does mean you do have to inhabit you then have to go on a new hero's journey, which is sort of the, like, redemption part of that, because there still has to be consequences.
Yeah, like, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, in this book, it seems like enlightenment and redemption are being intermingled. Like, the very fact that Rand becomes enlightened means that he is redeemed. And it's like, redemption is not a single act that you can sort of achieve by yourself the way that you can with enlightenment. Like, redemption is a process where you have to, like, you know, be accountable for your actions and try and do better for your community to try and erase some of the harm that you have done.
Yeah, redemption is hard work, which I think we as millennials, thanks to Avatar: The Last Airbender and Prince Zuko, fully understand.
Yeah.
But, like, Robert Jordan's generation was still sort of hung up on the concept of, like, when someone is redeemed, then that's just, like, a one-and-done action. Either they die tragically redeeming themselves, or they experience enlightenment or whatever. And it's just, like, it's never... Narratively, that is very easy.
Sure.
You know? It's nice to have these massive moments of narrative catharsis, but, like, it's not realistic, and no one really buys it.
Sure, it's, like, nice in the moment, you know, that's literally what, like, catharsis is. You're supposed to feel good in the moment, but, like, would I ever hold the story of Randall Thor's enlightenment / redemption up against the, like, perfect narrative structure of Prince Zuko's arc?
Yeah.
Like, one of them makes more sense and is more satisfying ultimately. One of them, like, fully leans into, like, an embodiment of, like, you know, redemptive justice and not necessarily always being like punitive and carceral around characters. That's like one of the main themes of Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know. Anyway, drawing on lots of different media here. Star Wars, the Bible, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
All the hits.
all the greatest hits. To say that just like, it's so frustrating and disappointing to me. Like, if Perrin gets put on trial for killing 2 random dudes at the beginning of the series, why doesn't Rand get put on trial for all the horrific things he's done? Do might as well's alone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, we're jumping the gun a little bit here.
Sorry.
No, it's totally fine that this is coming up. It's just like to say we're going to talk much more at length about Rand's enlightenment when we get there, and we still have yet to like hit the major war crimes that Rand does. What's happening here is basically some unethical medical care. The equivalent of operating while drunk, you know. This surgeon does not have the full information because it has been withheld from her. That's bad. So more of that to come. This has left us with precisely 3 minutes to talk about Matt's entire... No, I love it, because what is there to say about Matt's chapter?
It starts in, like, speaking of abysses that continue to go lower and lower, I don't know how Brandon continues to just hit foul ball after foul ball with
clownification of Matt Cathon.
I know, like, he's
so
like
offensive.
He's created this he's arrived at the town where allegedly the person who has the sketch of him is. He's created this unnecessarily complicated plan of attack because he's really freaked out after Hindersap, which is totally fine.
That's the reason we're given, but I don't believe Matt would be freaked out.
Yeah, and like I also don't believe Matt would ever like dedicate this much of his like key general-esque figures into something this ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just silly.
He has also concocted elaborate backstories for each of them, which is supposed to be a point of humor. He has this sort of witty back and forth with Talmanese and another guy, and he's like literally written, which flagged that as part of the is Matt Cathon illiterate inconsistencies of this series. Written these like ridiculous backstories, and everyone is like, what? Whatever. Yeah. It's so silly.
All of which is to lead to Varen just shows up.
Yeah.
And is like, hi, it's me. I have traveling, so let's make a deal.
Yeah.
The only other thing that happens in this chapter is that Matt checks in on Aludra, who is still hard at work making her cannons called dragons. This I do find to be somewhat interesting, partly because we're talking about the logistics of creating the dragons, which I continue to find to be
really fascinating.
A fascinating process, like the sheer amount of resources that Aludra is requiring. I also think it is interesting that she and Matt have kind of like an awkward moment of acknowledging the fact that we still don't quite know the extent of their sexual relationship, but they certainly had some form of relationship before Tuon suddenly got involved.
Yeah.
I don't think it's handled great, but I like to see that the narrative at least attempted to acknowledge it and be like, yeah, this would be super weird to be in Eludra's position.
Yeah,
And be like, the guy she was kind of making out with, kind of her fuck buddy,
yeah,
is suddenly going through this whole narrative romance right in front of her and has not spoken to her in several books because of it.
Yeah, and it's also this romance is with the leader of the people who committed genocide against your entire family community.
Awkward.
And Matt's just like, it's really awkward because we like used to kiss, and like Tuan made it really awkward, and he's not even acknowledging the massacre of the Eliminators. So good job, Matt.
Ongoing, Matt.
Ex-boyfriend of the year.
So yeah, some like interesting things. I of course am thrilled to see Varen again. Varen holds a very interesting role in this book, this narrative.
I'm obsessed with her.
The series, honestly, she's very cool.
Yeah, she's very fun. Speaking of compulsion.
Yeah. Ooh, lobotomy tent.
Lobotomy tent it's haunting us.
So it's nice to see her again, but otherwise a complete waste of pages.
Page space.
It's not funny enough to justify it being a comic relief scene.
It's so stupid. Like, Matt doesn't care about backstories. Matt's flown by the seat of his pants his entire life.
Yeah, Matt's never planned a thing in his life besides a battle.
Matt is... whatever. I have no more words. The cats are doing some sort of crimes to each other.
So, next on the docket, as Rand also alludes to when he's talking to Nynaeve, is the meeting with the Shanshin, with Tuon. Then after that, Rand is like, I will turn my attention to Grendel. But first, we have to get through this meeting with Tuon. Spoiler, it will go badly. Both for us, the readers, and for pretty much everyone involved.
Like, how badly? Like, if you could put it on the Richter scale of earthquakes.
I don't know. Are we talking... There are very few physical consequences. We're not going to end up with any more arms lost.
Okay.
But morally, pretty reprehensible. And then think we get, like, one more Matt point of view.
Okay.
As he sort of has this negotiation with Varen, and then largely the rest of the book is going to be switching between Rand's arc and Edwin's arc.
Okay.
So we're running low on the side character side plots.
Okay.
That's what's on the docket.
All right, well, I accept. I mean, I've got no other option, but I accept.
We signed on for this podcast. No one's holding us to it.
No one's got
us.
a gun against my head.
But we're completionists.
The ghost of Robert Jordan does haunt me sometimes.
I haunt the ghost of Robert Jordan. That's what I choose. So that's what's next. There will be a week's delay in that because Sally's having a little vacation.
I'm having a little vacation, so you'll get this episode, no episode next week. Also, the transcript for this episode is going to be delayed. It's my week to do the transcript, but I will be out of town for most of that week, so I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Yeah, no stress.
But I will be on the beach.
Enjoying the beach, which is great. Everyone deserves a beach trip.
I love sitting on the beach.
Yeah, read some books that aren't Wheel of Time, etc.
Yeah, so that's kind of logistics stuff.
The schedule, Patreon stuff will be coming out as usual. No delays or ruptures there.
Yeah, exciting news from the We Don't Watch Outlanderverse. We are discussing the very popular series, The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. So if that interests you, perhaps consider checking out our Patreon.
Yeah, tee-hee. But thank you for listening.
Tee-hee.
Tee-hee. Thanks to Glenna McKenzie for our theme song. Thanks to our patrons on Patreon and our followers on social media. Do you have anything to add?
No,
or a sign
I
off?
do have a sign off.
Oh, great.
Okay, I work remotely, so I had to go into the office on Monday morning, this past Monday, and while I was going there, we're also, again, going on the previously mentioned vacation, which requires a lot of, like, logistic coordination, just to, like, get the whole family to the lake with everything that we need. So I called my mom on my commute to just be like, what do you need me to do? Like, what do I have to pick up? Da-da-da-da. So she's, like, running through this list of logistics as I'm driving. It's also, like, 8:15 in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I did not feel well. So I fully acknowledge the possibility that this was a hallucination. But as I was driving, there was one of those, like, road signs that typically says, you know, like, left lane closed ahead. there was 2 screens I was flashing back and forth between. The first one that I saw was at the Mattress Supply. So I was like, oh, maybe there's a wreck or something.
What?
And I was like, but there isn't like a mattress store near us, so this is kind of weird. And then it flashes to the next screen. You guys, I know this sounds insane, but it's... It said,
No.
cock and ball torture, and then it flashed to the other screen at the Mattress Supply. So, again, I fully acknowledge that maybe it was a hallucination, but I tried so desperately to get a picture of it, but I was driving. But this was right by the Shane Company on State Street. There was just a sign that said, cock and ball torture at the Mattress Supply.
Given a million years, I would never have guessed that that's what was at the Mattress Supply.
Yeah, so I don't know if it had been, like, hacked, or it was some sort of prank, or if it was a very strange hallucination that I had.
It has to have been some sort of prank.
Yeah.
But, oh my god.
Yeah, so I'm sorry it took me so long to get through that.
No, that was incredible.
But that's what happened to me on Monday morning, and I was on the phone with my mom, and I was like,
I have to go.
what?
Excuse me, I have to go to the mattress.
I have to go to the Mattress Supply store for very personal reasons.
What's going on?
I have to investigate.
Where's the mattress?
I was like, I do not know what store they were talking about. There's no mattress store near us at all.
Wow.
So anyway.
Okay, I have to process that, but thanks everyone for listening. Goodbye?